Snow needles the faces of tired men as a huge gray shape steps onto an alpine ledge and the rock shudders under its weight. Below, Italy lies hidden in cloud, yet Hannibal Barca insists his elephants must go forward. Late in 218 BCE, the Carthaginian army is high in the mountains somewhere between the Rhône Valley and the plains of the Po. The air is thin, the path is barely wider than a cartwheel, and the drop falls away into darkness. Soldiers brace ropes and wedge timbers into cracks. Mahouts murmur to animals that do not understand ice. One elephant refuses, plants its feet, and the line behind it tightens like a knot. Sources suggest Hannibal began the march with roughly 36 elephants, often given as 37, most likely North African forest elephants or similar smaller types rather than the towering Indian animals seen later in the East. Whatever their exact kind, each one eats and drinks like a moving siege engine. In the lowlands, that is difficult. Up here, it is brutal. Men scrape snow to find frozen grass. They cut branches to keep trunks busy and calm. Hannibal's decision is the riddle that still pulls historians back to this ridge. Elephants are slow to feed, hard to house, and easy to panic. So why bring them at all? The practical answer is intimidation. Elephants can shove through infantry lines and, more reliably, frighten horses. The deeper answer may be political. If Italian communities see beasts no Roman general has ever marched over the Alps, they might believe Rome can be shocked and perhaps beaten. Hannibal is about 29 years old, commander in Spain and now invader of Italy. Rome expects him by sea. He has chosen the route no fleet can blockade, the land road through Gaul and over the Alps. Every step is meant to steal time from Roman planning and steal confidence from Roman allies. The mountain tribes understand the stakes too. They watch from higher rocks, choose when to throw stones, and bargain for safe passage. Hannibal answers with gifts, threats, and sudden violence. He cannot pause long. The animals need forage and the men need firewood, and both are scarce. Polybius, writing within living memory of the war, describes the cliffs and the terror of the crossing. Livy later adds vivid scenes of ambush and storm. Modern writers like Adrian Goldsworthy and John Lazenby keep returning to the same question. Was the elephant march a weapon or a message? By the time the army reaches Italy, the elephants will already have done something no battlefield could match. Prove that Hannibal is willing to attempt the impossible. If you enjoy calm, fact-based stories like this, consider subscribing as we follow this march step by step. Far below the snowline lies the older story that made this gamble almost inevitable. In 241 BCE, Carthaginian sailors watch Sicily slip away, and they know the sea itself now feels Roman. On the docks of Carthage, defeat is measured in ships burned, ports taxed, and pride cut to the bone. The First Punic War ends with Carthage ceding Sicily to Rome and paying a heavy indemnity. Rome, once a regional power, has learned how to build fleets, how to grind down a rival, and how to demand terms. Carthage, still wealthy and skilled at diplomacy, now faces a crisis closer to home. Thousands of unpaid soldiers, Libyans, Spaniards, Gauls, turn from hired men into enemies. The brutal struggle that follows, often called the Mercenary War, drags across North Africa and forces Carthage to fight for its own survival. Out of that chaos rises the Barca family. Hamilcar Barca, a commander from the Sicilian fighting, argues that Carthage must rebuild strength where Rome cannot easily reach. He looks west to Iberia, modern Spain, rich in silver, timber, and fighting men. There, he can raise an army, train it, and pay it without pleading for quick fixes at home. Elephants fit this strategy in two ways. In North Africa, Carthage has long used them as shock troops and as living announcements of power. They appear on Punic coinage, and later writers treat them as a signature of Carthaginian arms. Yet they are also a burden. Each elephant needs handlers, water, and huge amounts of fodder. To field them, a commander must control land, roads, and storehouses. Building an Iberian domain means building the kind of system that can keep such animals alive, and that, in turn, means conquest with consequences. Rome watches. In the 230s and 220s BCE, Roman influence spreads through Italy and toward the western Mediterranean. Roman allies expect protection, and Roman senators have learned to read a rival's recovery as a future war. Treaties are proposed, boundaries argued, most famously the Ebro line, yet suspicion stays. To many Romans, a Carthaginian power base in Spain looks like a spear being sharpened out of reach. By 221 BCE, Hamilcar is dead. Command in Spain passes first to his son-in-law Hasdrubal, then to Hamilcar's son Hannibal. In Carthage, some leaders prefer caution, but in Spain the army has momentum, and momentum creates its own politics. The map is tilting, one city determined not to be humbled again, and one republic convinced its rivals must never recover. Polybius sketches these tensions as the roots of the Second Punic War. Livy frames them as a rivalry that cannot cool. Modern historians like Dexter Hoyos underline how Spain's resources made another clash almost inevitable. In Iberia, that rivalry finds a face, young, controlled, and already looking beyond the horizon. He rides along the walls of New Carthage in 221 BCE, stops beside the elephant pens, and watches handlers test a young bull's temper. Hannibal does not smile. He measures. Hannibal Barca grows up in the shadow of defeat and renewal. Ancient tradition, repeated by Livy and others, claims that as a boy he swore hatred of Rome at his father Hamilcar's altar. Whether the scene happened exactly that way is debated, but the meaning fits what we can see. By the time Hannibal takes command in Iberia, his policy is aggressive, and his horizon is Italy. New Carthage, today Cartagena, anchors the Barcid project. It is a harbor and an arsenal, a place to gather Iberian allies and to ship silver and supplies. From their Hannibal campaigns inland, pushing through tribal territories, taking hostages, recruiting cavalry, and testing discipline. He needs speed, but he also needs weight, siegecraft for cities, and spectacle for diplomacy. Elephants provide both. Carthaginian sources are lost, but later writers imply that animals were captured in North Africa and shipped across to strengthen the Spanish army's impact. Keeping elephants fit in Spain is not glamorous. Fodder must be cut and stored. Water must be found daily. The animals' feet must be checked for stones and rot. Mahouts, often men with long experience, train them to respond to pressure of heel, hook, and voice. In battle, the goal is simple: move forward in line, do not turn, and do not panic. That is why commanders deploy elephants carefully, usually early, when the noise is still bearable. Hannibal also learns another lesson: elephants are not magic. A frightened animal can trample friends as easily as enemies. Missiles can wound eyes and ears. If an elephant bolts, a whole wing of infantry may crack to make room. So Hannibal treats them like a precious tool, useful when the timing is right, disastrous when it is not. Rome receives reports from Spain and listens with impatience. Senators have heard of Hamilcar, then Hasdrubal, and now this younger man who speaks of security while taking more territory. Roman envoys negotiate. Iberian chiefs bargain. Both sides count allies. Polybius presents Hannibal as a commander formed by constant campaigning. Livy preserves the oath story as a dramatic symbol. Modern historians such as John Lazenby stress how Hannibal's Iberian army became a professional instrument, able to march far and fight hard. In 219 BCE, one coastal city will force everyone to stop talking and start choosing sides. The first stones hit Saguntum's walls in 219 BCE, and the sound carries across the coastal plain like a public verdict. Hannibal has chosen a target that cannot be taken quietly. Saguntum lies near the Mediterranean coast, south of the Ebro River, but claims friendship with Rome. To Hannibal, it is both a strategic obstacle and a test. If he can break a fortified city tied to Roman prestige, he can prove that Rome's warnings are only words. He surrounds the place, cuts roads, and begins the long work: ramps, towers, rams, and constant pressure. The defenders answer with sorties and fire, turning every breach into a killing ground. Elephants appear less as battering rams than as morale weapons. Kept behind the lines, they remind allies and enemies that Carthage has depth, strange power to spare. They also help guard camps and intimidate would-be raiders. Yet Hannibal cannot risk them in tight streets or under heavy missiles. A wounded elephant in a confined space is a disaster. So the siege depends on engineers, infantry discipline, and patience. Months pass. Hannibal is wounded. Sources say a javelin strikes him. yet he returns to the works. Inside Saguntum, hunger grows. Outside, Hannibal keeps his army busy, rotating units, rewarding bravery, punishing desertion. He needs these men for a far larger march. When the city's outer defenses fail, fighting becomes house to house near the gates. At last, Saguntum falls, and Hannibal seizes supplies, weapons, and captives that can be traded for loyalty. Rome debates. It sends envoys to Carthage, demanding restraint, then punishment. The Carthaginian political class argues back. Saguntum is not under Rome's treaty protection, and Rome itself has broken promises before. In the Roman Senate, the question becomes blunt. If Saguntum falls and Rome does nothing, what ally will trust Rome again? War is declared. Hannibal winters his army, settles disputes among Iberian allies, and prepares the animals for travel, hardening feet, training them to tolerate noise and crowds, and assigning trusted mahouts. The elephants will not win the war by themselves, but they will help announce it. Polybius treats Saguntum as the direct trigger. Livy emphasizes the drama of the siege and the embassy. Archaeological work on the region confirms a fortified settlement and a violent horizon in this period, even if the exact scenes remain literary. Modern scholars like Adrian Goldsworthy note how Hannibal needed a casus belli that would rally his mixed army. With Saguntum's smoke behind him, Hannibal turns north, and the long road begins to charge its price in men and beasts. In spring 218 BCE, Hannibal leaves New Carthage with an army that looks like a moving city, infantry, cavalry, pack animals, and elephants threading between wagons. He points them north, away from the sea where Rome expects to find him. The march begins at the Ebro River. Crossing it is more than geography. It is a signal to Iberian tribes that Hannibal will not stop at old boundaries. Some join him for pay or revenge, others resist and force brief, sharp battles. Each fight costs time and men. Hannibal responds by pushing hard, then splitting forces. Garrisons are left behind to guard passes and keep supply routes open back to Spain. His invasion army becomes smaller, but more mobile. The Pyrenees rise next, a rough barrier of forests and narrow valleys. Here, desertion begins. Soldiers who signed on for Spanish campaigning see the mountains and realize the war is moving far from home. Hannibal cannot chase every runner. He tightens discipline, distributes loot from earlier victories, and speaks to the men as if the future already belongs to them. He also tries to keep the elephants visible, calm, and steady. If the animals panic, the army's confidence cracks. If the animals advance, the march looks unstoppable. At this stage, the elephants are still valuable military assets. In skirmishes, their presence can discourage charges. More importantly, they anchor the march's identity. This is not a raid. It is an invasion led by a commander who expects to meet Roman legions on their own ground. Hannibal assigns forage parties ahead of the column, looking for river meadows and harvested fields. Where locals resist, the army takes what it needs. Where locals cooperate, Hannibal pays or promises restraint, because an elephant cannot be fed on fear alone. By the time Hannibal reaches southern Gaul, his army has already been reshaped by distance. He has reduced the number of unreliable troops and kept the hardened core, African infantry trained to hold, Iberian swordsmen who move fast, and cavalry that can scout and strike. The elephants march among them, protected like a treasure that can also trample. Polybius gives a sense of numbers and losses, but admits that exact figures are hard. Livy offers larger totals, and modern historians like John Lazenby caution that both ancient traditions may compress events. What is clear is the direction. Each ridge crossed makes return less likely. In Rome, confident plans are about to collide with a simple surprise. Hannibal is already far closer than he should be. In Rome, the war is voted with confidence, and the consuls draw their lots as if the outcome is already arranged. Then reports arrive. Hannibal is not sailing. He is marching. In 218 BCE, Rome plans a familiar kind of campaign. One consul, Publius Cornelius Scipio, is assigned to Iberia to cut Hannibal's base apart. The other, Tiberius Sempronius Longus, prepares to strike North Africa, threatening Carthage itself. It is a two-pronged plan built on sea power, quick movement, and the assumption that Hannibal must use ships to reach Italy. Hannibal's land route through Gaul attacks that assumption. It also attacks the Roman alliance system. If he can appear in northern Italy before Rome's armies are positioned, he can convince the Gauls of the Po Valley to rise, and he can show Rome's Italian allies that Roman strategy can be outflanked. Scipio sails to Massilia, modern Marseille, expecting to meet Hannibal near the coast. Instead, he hears that the Carthaginian army has already crossed into the interior. Roman cavalry patrols clash with Carthaginian scouts, and in those quick encounters the Romans see something unsettling. Disciplined foreign infantry, aggressive cavalry, and, rumored behind them, elephants. Even if an officer never sees the animals clearly, the idea travels faster than the truth. A beast that can turn a horse aside becomes a story that turns a city's confidence aside. Scipio makes a hard decision. He cannot chase Hannibal deep into Gaul and still protect Rome's broader plan. So he sends a force onward to Spain under his brother Aeneas, while he himself turns back toward Italy to prepare defenses. It is an admission that Hannibal has seized the initiative. Meanwhile, Sempronius continues towards Sicily, ready to pivot when needed. The Roman Senate begins to understand the stakes. If Hannibal reaches the Po Valley, he will be fighting among people who resent Roman rule. He will be close to Italy's grain routes and within reach of the road network leading south. The war will be on Roman soil. Polybius emphasizes the speed and intelligence behind Hannibal's maneuver. Livy preserves the alarm in Rome and the urgency of Scipio's choices. Modern historians like Dexter Oyos note that Rome's original plan was rational, until Hannibal changed the map. Between Hannibal and the Alps lies the Rhône, wide, cold, and guarded by men who do not want him to cross. The Rhône runs cold and strong in late summer 218 BCE, and its current does not care about Hannibal's plans. On the far bank, armed tribes gather. Behind, Roman forces are somewhere to the south, closing the distance. Hannibal reaches the river near the territory of the Volsci and other Gallic groups. He needs speed, but he cannot force a crossing under constant attack. So he uses deception and timing. He negotiates with some locals for boats and timber, then quietly sends a detachment upstream under a trusted officer. Ancient sources name Hanno in this role, to find a ford or build rafts away from the main enemy watchers. At dawn, the main body begins to cross. Light troops and cavalry go first, shielding the boats with arrows and javelins. When the upstream detachment strikes the enemy camp from behind, the tribes on the bank hesitate, then break. The window opens. Hannibal pours men and horses across while the fighting is confused. Smoke rises from burning huts. Prisoners are taken. The survivors scatter into the woods. Then comes the real test, the elephants. An elephant can swim, but it does not like to be surprised by water under its feet. Handlers build large rafts and lash them together, covering them with soil and brush so the animals think they are stepping onto solid ground. Some elephants go willingly, following a calm lead animal. Others panic when the raft shifts, trumpeting and pushing men aside. If one falls into the river, it can still cross by swimming, but a thrashing trunk can crush a boat or swamp a raft. Mahouts work fast, keep the head above water, steady the raft, speak low, and never let the animal turn. Only after the last elephants climb dripping onto the opposite shore does Hannibal allow himself a pause. He sacrifices, addresses the troops, and sends for guides who claim to know the mountain routes. Not long after, Scipio reaches the Rhône and finds the river empty of Carthaginians, just tracks, trampled reeds, and the rumor of beasts. Hannibal has slipped away again. Polybius gives the clearest ancient account of the crossing method. Livy repeats the soil-covered rafts and adds dramatic touches. Modern historians like John Lazenby treat the basic engineering as plausible, while reminding us that details may be polished by later retellings. With the river behind him and Roman cavalry searching, Hannibal turns toward the only path left, the rising shadow of the Alps. The first Alpine storm hits like thrown gravel, and the elephants huddle shoulder to shoulder as wind pushes snow into their eyes. Hannibal looks up at a line of rock and realizes that from here on, every step is a fight against the ground itself. After leaving the Rhône, the army follows river valleys toward the mountain approaches. Local chiefs offer friendship, then demand hostages, then vanish into forests. Hannibal alternates between diplomacy and force. Polybius describes ambushes on narrow paths where men are shoved into ravines. Livy adds tales of treachery by guides. The core problem is believable either way. A long column, stretched out for miles, cannot defend every wagon and every animal at once. Elephants complicate everything. Their weight breaks soft trail edges. Their feet slide on wet rock. When the path narrows, they cannot easily step aside to let panicked men pass. So the engineers work constantly. They widen corners with pick and lever. They lay down logs, brush, and packed earth where stone is slick. They force the column into a rhythm. Move, stop, breathe, move again. Food becomes the daily crisis. An elephant can strip a hillside of shrubs in minutes. But up here there is little to strip. Forage parties fan out into valleys below, guarded by cavalry. When locals hide grain, Hannibal's men tear apart huts and threshing floors. Where nothing is found, elephants chew bark and carry on. Some likely weaken. Sources do not count these losses clearly, but they do admit that many animals will not survive the full winter. Then the tribes strike hard. In one major attack, they wait until the column is pinned along a cliff, then roll stones and charge. Hannibal fights in person, driving his best infantry to hold the high ground. He must keep the elephants back until the path is secure. If they panic in a crush, the army is finished. Only when the attackers fall away does he push the animals forward again, step by careful step. Evidence anchors are thin but consistent. Polybius' mountain narrative, Livy's expanded version, and later discussions by historians like Adrian Goldsworthy, who emphasize logistics over romance. Archaeological debate about routes continues, but the realities, cold, height, harassment, do not depend on the exact pass. Ahead lies the worst kind of obstacle in the mountains, a road that simply stops. A path collapses under a mule, and the animal disappears soundlessly into the fog before anyone can shout. Hannibal's column stops, not by command, but because the mountain has removed the road. Somewhere near the highest point of the crossing, sources cannot name it with certainty, the Carthaginians face a fresh obstacle, a section of trail destroyed by landslide or deliberate sabotage. The army cannot simply detour, cliffs hem them in. The elephants, heavy and nervous, wait while men inch forward to test the rubble. This is where the which pass debate begins. Polybius describes a view into Italy from a high ridge and mentions a dangerous descent. Livy adds specific scenes of snow and tribal attacks. Modern scholars have proposed routes like the Mont Genèvre, the Little St. Bernard, the Col du Clapier, and others, weighing distances, gradients, and ancient descriptions. The safest statement is also the most human. Whichever pass it was, it forced an exhausted army to solve an engineering problem at altitude. Hannibal orders the road rebuilt. Men cut into the slope, drag stones into place, and drive wooden stakes to anchor a new track. Fires are lit to fracture rock. Vinegar appears in Livy's story as a tool to crack stone, an account many modern historians treat cautiously, perhaps as embellishment or misunderstanding of heated rock and liquids. But the core action is clear. The road is widened, packed, and tested repeatedly. Elephants are brought forward last, with every eye watching. Mahouts lead them one by one. Soldiers line the edges with spears planted as makeshift barriers. An elephant steps onto loose scree, slips, catches itself, then advances. The sound of its breathing fills the cold air. When one animal hesitates, the men behind it feel their own fear rise. If it turns, it blocks the whole army. Losses mount. Many pack animals die, some men freeze, others fall. By the time the column begins the final descent into the Italian side valleys, it is thinner and harsher. Yet that descent delivers its own shock. Green lower slopes, wider paths, and the first villages that do not expect war. Polybius notes Hannibal's speech to restore morale. Livy emphasizes suffering. Modern historians like John Lazenby point out that even reduced numbers were enough to threaten Rome if local allies rose. The elephants, few but unforgettable, complete the image. Invaders from the far south stepping into Italy with beasts Rome associates with foreign kings. On the Italian plains, the war finally has room to breathe, and Rome is already moving to meet it. On the plains near the Po River, Roman cavalry sees dust rising. and then the dust parts around tusks and swinging trunks. For the first time, Italians watch elephants move in formation on their own soil. Late in 218 BCE, Hannibal enters the Po Valley exhausted but dangerous. He needs allies immediately. The Gallic tribes of the region, many resentful of Roman encroachment, see his arrival as a chance to strike back. Hannibal releases prisoners from these peoples and speaks of Rome as the shared enemy. Recruits begin to arrive with food and guides, easing the supply crisis for men and animals alike. Rome responds under Publius Cornelius Scipio, who has hurried back from the Rhône. Near the river Ticinus, cavalry clashes in a sharp encounter. Hannibal's Numidian horsemen dart and harass, while heavier cavalry presses. Scipio is wounded and pulled from the field. The Roman force withdraws toward the Trebia River. The message is clear. Hannibal's cavalry is a weapon, and Roman commanders can bleed. Tiberius Sempronius Longus joins Scipio with fresh troops, eager to fight. Hannibal reads that eagerness like a map. In December 218 BCE, near the icy Trebia, he sets a trap. He sends light troops to provoke the Romans, drawing them across the freezing river in the morning cold. The Roman infantry arrives wet and shivering. Hannibal's men, fed and warmed, are already in position. Elephants take their place on the wings. Their job is not subtle. Push back Roman cavalry, crowd the flanks, and add chaos to the moment when Roman lines start to strain. Horses dislike the smell and movement. Some shy away, breaking formations. Roman skirmishers hurl javelins and stones. Elephants flinch, but keep moving if their mahouts can hold them steady. Meanwhile, Hannibal's hidden detachment, Polybius credits Mago, Hannibal's brother, strikes from concealment, hitting the Romans when they are already disordered and half-numb from cold. The battle ends in a Roman defeat. Many Romans fight their way out. Many drown in the river trying to escape. Hannibal wins his first major Italian victory, and the elephants become part of the story told in every campfire rumor from the Po to the Apennines. But winter is merciless. After Trebia, sources report that most of Hannibal's elephants die from cold, exposure, and lack of forage. Later tradition singles out one survivor, sometimes named Surus, though details vary. Polybius gives the tactical outline. Livy expands the drama of the freezing river and the ambush. Modern historians like Adrian Goldsworthy stress that cavalry and planning mattered more than the elephants, yet the elephants shaped perception. By 217 BCE, the beasts are fading from the field, but their memory still marches ahead into Roman fear. A Roman column marches along the north shore of Lake Trasimene on a misty morning in June 217 BCE, and the hills are too quiet. Then the fog erupts with shouting, horns, and steel. After Trebia, Hannibal pushes deeper into Italy. He wants to unbalance Rome's politics and pull Italian allies away. In early 217 BCE, he crosses the Apennines and moves into Etruria, raiding to feed his army and to demonstrate that Roman territory can be violated at will. One march is especially punishing. He passes through marshland near the Arno River. Ancient sources say Hannibal endures days in water and mud, and that he suffers an eye infection that leaves him with partial blindness. The detail is plausible, though the exact medical story is beyond recovery. By now, the elephants are mostly gone. The cold after Trebia and the hard marches have likely killed nearly all of them. Later tradition singles out one survivor and even imagines Hannibal riding it for a time. Sources disagree, so it is safer to say only that the elephant's physical presence fades while their legend grows. Italians have seen the beasts once. Now they imagine them everywhere. Roman allies hear inflated numbers. Carthaginian scouts may even use the rumor, letting it swell without correction. Rome sends a new consul, Gaius Flaminius, to block Hannibal. Flaminius is determined to catch him, perhaps to erase the shame of earlier defeats. Hannibal chooses the battlefield. Near Lake Trasimene, he hides infantry on the hills and places troops in the woods. The Roman army marches into a narrow corridor between water and slope. When Hannibal signals, the trap closes. It becomes a battle without a front. Romans are attacked from side, rear, and above. Units cannot form properly. Many are driven into the lake. Others are cut down in the fog. The defeat shocks Rome. In the city, Panic runs through forums and temples. The Senate appoints a dictator, Quintus Fabius Maximus, to steady the state. Fabius refuses to fight Hannibal on his terms. He follows, shadows, cuts off foraging, and waits for mistakes, accepting mockery for caution because he believes time is Rome's ally. Polybius' account of Trasimene is tight and tactical. Livy adds speeches and omens. Later writers like Appian echo the scale of the disaster. Modern historians such as John Lazenby point out how Flaminius' urgency met Hannibal's patience in the worst possible place. Rome does not break. Instead, it gathers its strength, and the next clash will be shaped by sheer numbers and unbearable heat. On a hot day in August 216 BCE, dust rises over the Apulian plain near Cannae, and two armies press so close that men can smell each other's sweat. Hannibal watches the Roman mass advance and waits for the exact moment it becomes a trap. Rome has decided that caution is no longer acceptable. After months of Fabian shadowing, the Republic raises an enormous force and sends two consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, to force battle. They find Hannibal near the river Aufidus, close to Cannae, where grain stores matter as much as glory. Hannibal positions his mixed infantry with a deliberate weakness in the center and stronger troops on the sides. His cavalry is ready to strike hard. Elephants are no longer the visible spear point of his story. They have largely vanished from the campaign. Yet the terror they once caused has been replaced by something more durable, the reputation of a commander who can make Rome bleed on command. At Cannae, the Romans push forward in a deep column, trying to crush Hannibal's center by weight. Hannibal's middle line bends back slowly, step by controlled step, drawing the Roman mass inward. On the flanks, Carthaginian and allied cavalry defeat the Roman horse, and then swing behind the Roman infantry. The stronger African infantry on the sides pivots inward like doors closing. The Roman army is surrounded. What follows is not a heroic duel. It is a slaughter in a tightening space. Men cannot swing swords properly. Units lose their officers. Those at the center are pressed by bodies and heat. Ancient sources give staggering casualty numbers. Whatever the precise tally, Cannae is one of the worst single-day disasters in Roman history. The consequence is immediate political shock. Some Italian communities begin to defect. Capua is the most famous, and parts of southern Italy, including elements around Tarentum later, waver. Hannibal has achieved the strategic goal he wanted: show that Rome cannot protect everyone. Yet Rome does something Hannibal cannot force with tactics alone. It refuses to negotiate. The Senate outlaws talk of surrender, raises new legions, and leans even harder on allies who remain loyal. Polybius provides the clearest battle narrative. Livy adds the consular tensions and moral edges. Later writers like Appian keep Cannae as a symbol of Roman endurance. Modern historians such as Adrian Goldsworthy stress how cavalry and formation, not elephants, created the encirclement. After Cannae, victory becomes a different kind of battlefield, one measured in alliances, supplies, and years. In 211 BCE, Capua's gates open not to Hannibal, but to Roman soldiers, and the message spreads. Rome can lose battles and still take cities. Hannibal's war in Italy is turning into a test of endurance. After Cannae, Hannibal lacks one thing he cannot improvise: siege equipment and steady reinforcements. He can win field battles, but he cannot storm Rome itself without a long preparation he does not have. Rome understands this and fights differently. It avoids the kind of massive, all-or-nothing battle Hannibal wants. It targets allies, supply routes, and key ports. Roman commanders like Marcus Claudius Marcellus fight hard around places such as Syracuse and Sicily, while others tighten control in Campania. Hannibal moves through southern Italy, around Capua, later toward Tarentum, seeking friendly cities and opportunities to split Roman coalitions. He wins local engagements and keeps his army alive by living off the land, but Rome's net slowly tightens. When Capua falls in 211 BCE, it is a warning to other defectors. Rome punishes betrayal and rewards loyalty. Meanwhile, the wider war matters. In Spain, Roman forces under the Scipio family fight to cut Hannibal's base. After setbacks and deaths, a new commander arrives, Publius Cornelius Scipio, the young survivor of earlier campaigns, later called Africanus. In 209 BCE, he captures New Carthage, striking at the Barcid heartland and taking stores, hostages, and shipping facilities. This does not instantly starve Hannibal, but it shifts the balance. The most dramatic turning point comes in 207 BCE. Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal crosses into Italy, likely following an Alpine route of his own, hoping to join forces. Rome intercepts his messages and forces battle near the Rhône River. Hasdrubal is defeated and killed. According to later tradition, his head is thrown into Hannibal's camp as a brutal announcement. Whether that exact act happened, the strategic fact is certain. Hannibal will not get the reinforcements he needs to break Rome. By now, elephants are a memory. Roman soldiers tell stories about them. Italian villagers repeat them. Coins and later art keep the image alive. But on the ground, the war is decided by marching speed, grain, and the ability to replace losses. Polybius covers the shift in Roman strategy. Livy details the campaigns and the shock of the Rhône. Modern historians like John Lazenby and Dexter Oyos emphasize how Rome learned to fight a long war better than Carthage could finance. Across the sea, Scipio is preparing a move that will force Carthage to feel what Italy has felt for years: invasion. In 204 BCE, Roman ships land on the African coast, and the war that began in Spain finally comes to Carthage's own doorstep. For Carthaginian elders, the choice becomes simple: recall Hannibal, or watch the homeland burn. Scipio has built his plan patiently. After victories in Spain, he convinces Rome to let him carry the fight to Africa. He allies with Numidian forces hostile to Carthage, most importantly the cavalry leader Massinissa. When Scipio lands near Utica, he brings not only legions, but a political weapon: the promise that Carthage's African allies can switch sides and survive. Carthage is forced to negotiate, stall, and fight, often at once. Skirmishes and larger clashes weaken Carthaginian confidence. At last, the government sends urgent orders for Hannibal to return from Italy. After more than a decade on enemy soil, Hannibal boards ships with veterans and sails back across the Mediterranean, arriving in Africa around 203 BCE. The man who once brought elephants over the Alps now returns to face elephants on open plains. For at Zama, elephants are again central. Carthage fields a large number. Ancient sources suggest many dozens, sometimes around 80. Hannibal places them at the front to disrupt Roman lines and give his infantry room to strike. Scipio prepares carefully. He arranges his maniples in columns with gaps between them, lanes that can funnel charging elephants through without breaking the whole formation. Light troops and trumpeters are positioned to frighten and deflect the animals. Javelins target eyes and trunks, and to peel the beasts away from the main line. When the battle begins in 202 BCE, some elephants charge straight, but others veer, confused by noise and missiles. A portion turn back into Carthaginian lines, causing the very disorder they were meant to inflict. Scipio's infantry holds, and Massinissa's cavalry, along with Roman horse, fights for control of the wings. The decisive moment comes when Roman and Numidian cavalry return to strike Hannibal's rear, echoing the encirclement Hannibal once achieved at Cannae. Hannibal's veterans fight hard, but the balance has shifted. Carthage loses. The terms that follow strip its power: loss of overseas possessions, heavy payments, and restrictions on war-making. The elephant that once symbolized Carthaginian threat is now a reminder of a gamble that could not be repeated forever. Polybius, who knew men connected to the war, offers a key account of Zama. Livy follows him closely. Modern historians like Adrian Goldsworthy highlight how Scipio's handling of elephants was disciplined rather than miraculous. When the dust settles at Zama, Hannibal's war ends, but his name becomes harder for Rome to escape. In 202 BCE, Hannibal walks the streets of Carthage again, not as conqueror, but as the man who must explain a lost war. Some citizens stare with anger, others with awe, and Rome watches from far away with careful suspicion. Carthage survives Zama, but it is no longer free to act like an empire. The treaty terms bind it: payments, limits on warfare, and the constant pressure of Roman diplomacy. Hannibal, still famous and still feared, turns to politics. Later traditions say he holds high civic office and drives reforms to stabilize finances, curb corruption, and keep Carthage functioning under Roman demands. Even if details are blurred by hostile storytelling, the basic point fits the moment. Rome does not want Hannibal in uniform again, and Carthage cannot afford another mistake. Suspicion follows him anyway. When Rome confronts King Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire in the east, Roman diplomats treat Hannibal like a spark that could ignite any coalition. Hannibal leaves Carthage, whether forced or choosing exile is debated, and appears at eastern courts as an advisor. He urges bold strategy against Rome, but he lacks what made him dangerous in 218 BCE, an independent base, trusted officers, and the freedom to choose the battlefield. After Antiochus is defeated, Hannibal becomes a wanted man, slipping between patrons and ports as Roman pressure closes. By the 180s BCE, he is in Bithynia near the Sea of Marmara. Roman envoys arrive, pressing the local king to hand him over. In 183 BCE, rather than be surrendered, Hannibal takes poison. Ancient accounts disagree on the exact words and setting, but they agree on the ending. Rome never parades him in chains. And what of the elephants? Militarily, their role in this war is brief. A thunderclap in 218 BCE, a harsh winter after Trebia, then absence in Italy, and finally a massed presence at Zama, mostly against Hannibal, not for him. Psychologically, their shadow is longer. They became shorthand for his audacity, not just crossing mountains, but crossing expectations. Polybius is restrained and practical. Livy is richer and more theatrical. Later authors like Appian amplify the legend. Modern historians, Adrian Goldsworthy, John Lazenby, Dexter Oyos, tend to agree that elephants mattered less as winning weapons than as a signal that Hannibal was willing to wager everything on surprise. If you'd like more calm, cinematic journeys through ancient history, subscribe and stay with me. When you picture that Alpine ledge again, remember, the first victory was the story itself.